Hi, thank you so much for watching. My name is Alex Lawless, and I'm the designer of Reign and Conquer, which is a tabletop military strategy game that brings in grand military strategy along with civilization building. So the point of the game is to accomplish three things. Number one is you're going to obviously wage a military campaign on the board against other players, and number two is you're going to build up an economy, and then number three is don't be eliminated. Let's talk about turn sequence. So the game is played in a series of rounds. Each round consists of 4 phases. So you have the event phase, the economy phase, agent phase, and campaign phase. In the event phase, you resolve a bunch of negative effects, and you also draw a card. And the way the phases work is each player goes in turn. So like player 1 will draw their card, and then player 2, player 3, player 4, so on and so forth. And then you move on to the next phase. So then players move on to the economy phase, which is where they'll collect revenue from their settlements and their territories on the game, and then they'll spend that revenue however they see fit. Next, you have the agent phase, where players will move around their agent pieces throughout the board and cause havoc, do secret missions. They can plant the plague, just cause all kinds of mayhem. And then finally, we get to the campaign phase, which is where all the players are going to, in turn, carry out their military campaigns or wage battle. And then once that's done, we return to the top of the round structure, and then you can roll for there to be a new first player and start all over again. All right, so here we have the map. It's a map of medieval Europe. Obviously, this is a prototype, so I'm using a Risk board, Risk Europe to be exact, and really I just use the board for the territories themselves. These little crown emblems, they don't really mean anything. That came with the actual Risk game itself, but I use these territories, and we have coinciding territory cards as well. Alright, and then we have coinciding territory cards for each territory out there. Players will keep up with the territories that they control and have that territory card. And we'll kind of get more into that later on, but just know for now that these cards match the territories out there. Alright, so let's talk about settlements. So there are 2 types of settlements in the game. There's military settlements, and then there are civilian settlements. So the top row is civilian settlements consisting of the village, the town, and the city, and they generate revenue. And then on the bottom row, we have the military settlements consisting of the barracks, the fort, and the castle, and they increase your recruitment capacity, so the amount of troops that you can put on the board to wage war. Okay, so let's talk about crowns. There are black crowns, bronze crowns, silver crowns, and 1 gold crown. And these get randomly assigned at the beginning of the game using those same territory cards we talked about earlier. And they increase the value of the territory. So it just is different each game. Alright, so now let's talk about negative effects. And we have 3 tokens for negative effects. Number 1, we have the plague. And the plague gets introduced at the beginning of the game, and there's events that can cause it to spawn throughout the entirety of the game, and it can spread from territory to territory and causes an economic downturn. Next, we have red unrest tokens. So these tokens represent how much internal unrest your faction has, and you don't want to get more than 3 of them. Otherwise, you could trigger an internal rebellion. And then finally, we have the damage token, and this represents that a settlement has been damaged and no longer produces anything. It doesn't produce any troops, or it doesn't produce any money. Alright, so let's move on to the actual currency of the game. So we have bronze, silver, and gold. Pretty simple. So your bronze equals 1, and your silver equals 5, and your gold equals 10. Now we have the agent pieces, and the agents are basically used kind of like spies or assassins, and they work outside of direct combat to influence the game. So basically you'll move your agents around, and then you can perform certain missions in each territory, such as planting the plague or spreading unrest or just causing other chaos in general. Okay, so next we'll talk about the player pieces. So first off, we have the capital. That piece just represents your capital territory, your seat of power. Next, we move on to the military pieces, and that includes the infantry pieces. So every 5 infantry equals 1 horseman. And then next we have the lord piece, the banner piece. And the banner piece provides a combat bonus to the army it is with. Alright, so next up we have siege units, and these can be attached to an army, and they are used to break into a fortified settlement. So we have the Ram Squad, and then we have the Trebuchet. Alright, so these are rebel units, and these are essentially non-player military units, and it's one of the unique features of the game. So in the very beginning of the game, players start off with 3 territories, and then the rest of the map is controlled by these rebel units, these non-player units, and the value and the amount of each territory that they control is different. So, and that's randomly generated at the beginning of the game by drawing the territory cards. Alright, so we have the fate cards here, and each player begins their turn by drawing a fate card. And we have 3 types. You have a green card with a positive effect, a black card which is kind of situational, and then you've got a red card that has a negative effect. So in this example here, our green card increases our recruitment capacity, our black card makes plagues even harder to deal with, and then the red card spreads plagues. Now we're just going to run through a round. We're going to go through a turn sequence. So we're going to start with phase 1, which is the fate phase. And I'm going to start by drawing my fate card. So my fate card is Rebel Rousers, gain 1 unrest token. So I'll go ahead and gain that, and I've got my unrest. And then the next 2 parts of this phase for me is I'll do an unrest check. So if I have 3 or more unrest tokens, I'll have to roll for a rebellion. Fortunately, I don't have that. I just have the 1 which I gained. So we can move past that. The next is the plague check, and I'm the blue faction over here. I'm not touching any plagues, so I don't need to do that check. So this is the end of my fate phase, and then we move on to player 2, and he will draw his card. His card is Patriotic Fervor, so his recruitment capacity increases by 3, and he also gets to pick 1 territory to gain 3 units. So he'll do that. Perfect. And then he'll do a unrest check as well. He has no unrest tokens, so he'll skip that entirely. And now we'll go to the plague check, where he actually does have a plague touching one of his territories that doesn't have a plague. So he'll need to roll 1 dice to see if that spreads. And he wants to roll anything other than 5 and a 6. So that was successful. The plague does not spread, it just stays right there. And now that's the end of his fate phase. That's the end of phase 1. So next we'll move on to the economy phase. And we're just going to do 2 things in this phase. Pretty simple. We're going to collect revenue from our territories and our settlements. And then we're going to spend that revenue. So in this example, I'm going to purchase troops equal to my recruitment capacity. In this example, I have a castle, so I can recruit 3 troops. So I'm going to go ahead and spend that and recruit my troops, place them on the board however I see fit. I can do that. And now I'll also purchase a barracks and place that on a territory I control. And that would be the end of my economy phase. All right, so next we'll move on to the agent phase, and each player will use their agent. And so in this example, I will use my agent, and we'll first begin by moving the agent up to 3 territories. So I'm going to move 1, 2, 3 onto my enemy player's territory. And then each agent can perform 1 mission. So in this example, I'm going to try and plant the plague on that territory, and I have to pay to do that mission. So I'm going to pay 2 coins, and then I have to attempt the mission, and I have to roll a 5+ to plant the plague there. So we're going to say I rolled a 5+ there, and my mission was successful, and then I would successfully have planted the plague in his territory. And that would be the end of my agent phase, and then we would go to the next player, and they would utilize their agent however they see fit. Now for the final phase, which is the campaign phase. In this part of the game, we'll wage military conquest and then expand into new territories. So pretty basic here. I'm the blue faction, and I'm going to attack from Leon Castel, and we're going to attack Nevaria. So what we'll do is the attacker will roll first. In this example, I rolled a 6 and a 5, and I'm battling the rebel units here who roll a 1 and 1. So my 5 beats the 1 and my 6 beats the other one. So I've won this battle. I've won this this combat, and I'll eliminate both units, and then I will expand into that territory however many units I see fit. So in this example, I'm just going to move 2 units in there to claim it. Okay, so one aspect of the game I just want to talk about briefly are the different factions that you play as. So there are several different factions to choose from that cater to different play styles, everything from an aggressive attacker to a more conservative builder. This particular faction gets a lot of extra resources at the very beginning of the game and has some combat bonuses as well. So it's just all about your type of flavor and how you want to play the game.